Bon dia. My name is Corey Huck. I am the newly appointed head of Syngenta Biologicals, and I'll give a little bit of background as to myself and how I became part of the passion around biologicals within Syngenta. So rewinding the clock a little bit, the last 2 days have been very enlightening in terms of agriculture in Brazil, and I've had the chance to touch agriculture in Brazil over the years in my career with Syngenta. So I grew up on a farm in the United States, in Nebraska, and raised pinto beans, great northern white beans, and corn. So I have a deep roots in agriculture, and I've had the opportunity at Syngenta, join them outside of the university, of really learning about global agriculture. And I had many stops along the career learning more about Brazilian agriculture and seeing, and in the last 2 days have highlighted the advances that have happened so greatly here in your country, and it's a fantastic story and a agriculture-based society. So I spent 23 years with Syngenta, and then I decided I would try a different career path at the end of 2015. And I spent some time in the consumer end of biotechnology in how do consumers adopt like a non-browning apple that's genetically modified or a genetically engineered salmon, and really got on the consumer end of understanding biotechnology and what technology in agriculture can do for us. And what I've learned is generally our consumers, who is really at the end of the day directs what we produce and how we produce it. And those consumers were not very adapting of these technologies. They have almost a technical phobia of adoption of new technologies. And so I spent some time with that company and really understood a lot more about the consumer acceptance of technology in agriculture. They're more than happy to adopt it in their phone or something that made their life convenient, but if there wasn't that trade-off, the adoption of the technology was obviously slowed. After that, I moved into an area where there was an interesting, and it was mentioned this morning in the first section around capital coming into agriculture. So venture capital was about $1.5 billion. It was about $1.5 billion 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's over $7 billion. So the amount of cash, the amount of capital coming into agriculture is pretty extraordinary right now, and it is driving some brand new technologies into the marketplace. So I spent the last 2 years working with a fund in agriculture of investing in the early stage startup companies. And what rose out of that for me is two things. First of all, the consumer is still the king, that we will produce what that consumer wants. And I think second, and more importantly, is the amount of technology that is available out there with all this newfound capital is really, really in an area that I have not seen before. And you match that with the consolidation at all levels of the markets, whether it be an input supplier all the way to the China-Brazil conversation we had yesterday, it all drives to adoption of technologies that consumers want. And that was at the time when I made my re-entry back into Syngenta to really understand how do you match that capital with what the consumers want with great technology. And that's really what I want to share with you over the next 10 or 15 minutes about biologicals and Syngenta and how we see that playing out over a long time. Why biologicals and why biologicals with Syngenta? I've mentioned the consumer, and the consumer is part of it, but there's also regulators who obviously represent the consumer, where they are saying, we really want to use less chemistry. We'd really like to have less pesticide residues. Whether these informed opinions or not doesn't seem to matter, or fact-based, but these are what they see and this is what they hear. And then you've got the grower, the producer on the other end saying, I have less and less products to use. If we would be sitting in Europe for this conversation, they can see products disappearing out of their toolbox every day and not good options to come and replace them. So the grower's sitting there saying, yeah, I got to produce more. You're taking tools out of my toolbox. And at the same time, the pest presence out there continues to grow in resistance to existing compounds, existing methods of application. So you've got a lot of challenges in the marketplace and a lot of need for unique and differentiated innovation in agriculture. So but why biologicals? I think that answers the question. One is the consumers asking for it, and I think that's the most important. And second of all, we do see the new modes of action, the new technology coming to the forefront that will actually drive biologicals from an adoption standpoint all the way down to the grower level. And it also comes with a expedited regulatory path in most countries, Brazil being one of them, where you can get a product from design all the way through into the grower's hands in a much shorter amount of time. So let me talk a little bit about what this market looks like and why we see such ambition in this area, driven by the components I just outlined. So today the market's around $3 billion, and it's a combination of both biotic, so biocontrols, and abiotic, which is more the biostimulants and how do you make the plant either use nutrients more efficiently and or fight different abiotic stresses and make the plant grow to a higher yield. And we see that market going to about 3x between now and 2030, which would be about a $10 billion market. So there's not a lot of markets that are available to us in agriculture that are going to have this type of growth. So Syngenta's ambition here is really threefold. One is to have the world-leading crop protection business, which we currently enjoy that spot, and we've spent a lot of years and a lot of great science getting to that position. The second is building a seeds business, which you see us doing, and specifically here in Brazil with Nadera last year. And the third component of that is how do we build for the future portfolio with biologicals. And those three will work together to really deliver a broader portfolio, not just of products, but of services and everything else that comes with supporting a producer to grow a crop more effectively. So our ambition today is to earn sustainable market leadership position, of which we don't have currently, and we will, and that's where we've been spending our time is how do we get two things, the first being the right capability commercially to get the products to the market, and the second was how do we get the right portfolio in place and meet the needs of the consumers. And then the third one, and this is a bit different for Syngenta in biologicals that you might have seen in seeds or in crop protection, is we will be adopting this not invented here approach to biologicals, meaning that we will not likely design and have research pointed entirely to our portfolio for agriculture, for biologicals. That means that we will have to depend on a lot of this $7 billion of revenue going into early venture capital, into early stage startups to understand how do we leverage their capabilities, how do we understand what products they have and bring those in, license those in where they make sense, or create the right collaborative partnership to build a portfolio that's second to none. And that's the way we get there, and we get there quickly. But at the same time, Syngenta's not just starting this journey. Syngenta has been on the journey of biologicals really since the early 90s with the introduction of Aflagard, which was mentioned yesterday for alpha toxins in corn. And really the strategy became a little bit more solidified in 2011 when we really started putting together both the research collaborations together with a more dedicated portfolio of both biocontrols and biostimulants. And as you could see along the way, you're picking up the elements of this collaborative approach in biologicals. First beginning with the Pasteria acquisition. So for those that are familiar with Clariva, that's where that technology came from a small startup called Pasteria based out of Florida in the U.S. And we've taken the product, leveraged all the capabilities of Syngenta from development to formulation to positioning and commercialization, and brought a very small company's product to life in a very big way. And I'll share with you a little bit of what the impact that has been in Brazil. And then next is the Devgen acquisition. So Devgen is brought into us the RNAi technology based out of Ghent, Belgium. And we have some very exciting technologies there that are 3 to 4 years away from reaching the marketplace as well. So the collaboration along those two really led us to a third one, which is about 3 years old with DSM, so Dutch State Mines out of the Netherlands, where they are really focused on identifying within their libraries biocontrols that could be very useful for the control of pests, whether it be fungicides, insecticides, or herbicides, herbicidal activities through those biologicals. So really three key collaborations that we use for the underpinning of our strategy within biologicals. So how about in Brazil? Make it a little closer to home. Today we have about 1 million hectares that are touched with a Syngenta biological. And the great news, and I think what really differentiates Brazil from the rest of the regions... Oh, we lost it, sorry. Thomas? Well, perhaps while we're getting the show back up, yeah. Okay, all right. So the projector has turned off. It'll take a few minutes to get it warmed up and operating again. So with that, I will just try to use the words to explain what the slides would be saying. But within Brazil, I think what is very unique and different here is the adoption of products so far has been pretty extraordinary in terms of, as I mentioned, thank you, Thomas. I think we're building back up here. Across both biostimulants, so where you're stimulating the crop for more yield, like for Qantas, and also all the way to Apivo, which is seed treatment, along with Cloriva for nematicide. The adoption seems to be very rapid, and what we are learning from biologicals, if you get the right technology and you match that with the right application or the right combination with the rest of the technologies, whether it be crop protection, traits, or seeds, you find a great intersection of those technologies that produce higher yields. And then I want to just make a note on the very bottom for the fall armyworm solution. There's a very interesting technology and a wave of enabling technology that use for pheromones, for example. Pheromones today are used in high-value crops. And the concept here is there's some early-stage companies, again, that are understanding the technology to release pheromones into a broader row crop mentality with lower cost of goods. So we're doing some trials early this year in Brazil and in a few other places around the world to understand how can pheromones be a bigger part of the overall portfolio. And as it gets enabled with technology, it opens use to other crops and other pests that we may not have previously thought about. So the picture that you see on the right is from here in Brazil. It's from the Goiás state, and that is where Cloriva has found a lot of success in really reducing the populations of up to 80% of the female cyst nematode. So this product is obviously adapting and being adopted very quickly by the Brazilian growers, and we see a lot more opportunity going forward with that in particular. So let me speak on the final slide here. We're not only going to depend on external innovation, we're also going to invest. And it was mentioned this morning about the $1.3 billion that Syngenta invests annually into research and development. And there is a portion of that obviously is focused on biologicals. So we have the platforms I mentioned with RNAi platform will be focused on beetles, stink bugs, corn rootworm, and that will be a key technology for use here in Brazil. And then the second is Pasteria. I just mentioned Cloriva. We have a second generation of Pasteria coming that's even more efficacious and will be in the market probably 3 to 5 years depending on the regulatory path. But we're very early stages, some really promising extensions and expanding the spectrum of Cloriva as part of that as well. And then finally on the top I mentioned the collaboration with DSM. And this is one of several other collaborations that we anticipate to have, which is really focused on how do we leverage that external innovation? How do we involve them to be part of us creating a solution together? And there's really two elements of it. One is the research element, and the other one is the development and commercialization of those technologies. So we will continue to spend more time, more effort on bringing the best technologies, whether they be locally produced or locally designed and locally researched here in Brazil, and we leverage that and bring it to life through the engine of Syngenta, or whether it be something that might be identified in Asia and could be used in Brazil, we'll bring that technology over as well. So we're looking far and wide and really looking at very, very early science that will turn what I would call biologicals today as kind of a Gen 1 technology, moving it to really a second generation, efficacy-driven, very great product line that will bring a lot of new options to us as producers and those of us within the value chain. And I think before I go to questions, the underlying message, I think, from Syngenta Biologicals really leans back into the conversation yesterday around sustainability and longevity. Bringing these products in, and we don't anticipate that it'll be a biologicals-only world in the future. That's going to be part of a bigger solution, as most all integrated pest management or integrated solutions are that have longevity. It will depend on crop chemistry, biologicals, and seeds and traits, and we see this as being an important part of that overall message and the technology portfolio that Syngenta will have to create. So I'll stop there. And I'll go ahead and move over to questions, Thomas. And I've got a couple, I think, that have just come in. And then I'll start with those. And if any more come in, you can get on the app and send those in. And if you want to just ask it via voice, Thomas can help me translate and get it answered. So the first one that has come in is, and I'll repeat it, is what has prevented the growth of biologicals until today? And why do you believe it is going to grow rapidly in the future? I think really yesterday's conversation and the setup this morning really answers that question really well for all of us. First and most importantly, the consumer is asking for it, and that is what's driving the demand. And I think second of all, more importantly, is the technology itself is getting better, and it's going to get to the point where the consumers, the grower is going to want these products because they're really good products and they work really well on his farm. So I think those two things are really going to drive the adoption rate, at least in the short term. Any other questions, Thomas, right now? If not, I've got another one here. The next question is, when do you predict the RNAi technology will reach the Brazilian market commercially? Well, that's a really good question. We're to the stage, and when I say broadly about RNAi technology, probably not just Syngenta's alone, because I think we're all very similar. There's that technology is still in the early stages of development and discovery, meaning that the mechanism is very clear, how it works is very clear. It's getting to be more clear of how do you get it into the plant efficiently, and so we can attack the right and have the right interference in the RNA nucleus. So we're very early stages in terms of commercialization or even entering the regulatory process. But my best guess right now is we're probably at least 5 years away from something that would be commercialized in any RNAi technology in Brazil. And again, there's still a little bit of questions in terms of regulatory process and how it's going to be applied to the RNAi technology. Okay. Let me see if I have any more questions. So we got a question here around why the innovation takes so long to reach Brazilian market. I don't think Brazil is unique in this way in terms of adopting the technology or getting biologicals into Brazil. I think it's a little bit of a challenge of the innovation and the science of technology reaching up with what the grower demands are. So I think that's a little bit of why you're only seeing 1 million hectares so far in comparison to our crop protection portfolio that's on hundreds of millions of hectares. So I think it's a combination of getting the right technology in the right hands. I think the second part of it is the regulatory path to get into the market is going to be more favorable as the consumer, whether it be the consumer in Brazil or an export consumer, as they demand it more. That's why we see this growth from about 3 billion to 10 billion over the next 10 years. And I think the other important thing for Brazil, and this is where I've seen a lot of the early stage technology really put a lot of their dollars and a lot of the venture capital dollars, is in biostimulants of how do you overcome abiotic stress, given the environment in Brazil, given the opportunity and matching that with the right technologies. I see the biostimulant area in particular in Brazil growing at a very fast rate over the coming years. So that's an area that we're focused on as well. We have a few products in the portfolio, but you'll see us build that portfolio out even more. Okay, let's see if we have any more questions. Okay, a good question here, so I'll repeat it. Does the use of biologicals with chemical take away the efficacy of the system, and how to improve this? So I think the question is there a lack of synergy, or maybe the opposite of actually reducing the efficacy of products used together in a biological chemical system? This is really interesting, and if you watch the patent area right now within both chemistries and biologicals, the use of the patented use of biologicals along with chemistries together are just shooting through the roof right now. And you can't have a patent, you won't be offered a patent unless it shows actual synergy in the field. So it's got to actually work and be efficacious. So that shows that this new generation of biological products, which a lot of them are hitting the market right now and will over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. But we're seeing that combination of a chemical with a biological working as well, if not better in most cases, than either one of them alone. So this is an area we put a lot of time, a lot of focus, and a lot of our development effort is to understand that interaction. So one is an actual combination, maybe a premix of those products, but where we see adoption more quickly is a integrated pest management system that looks something like using chemistry for maybe your first 3 sprays and finishing with a biological that helps you with your maximum contaminant level export, meeting those contaminant levels, as well as consumer overall acceptance and sustainability measures. So that's, I think I'm going to need to close down for biologicals. I will be around, obviously, for the rest of the day and happy to speak to any of you more about biologicals, but thank you for your engagement and thank you for the questions. Have a nice day. Thanks.